All right. I think we're going. Hello, everybody. Jeremiah Osborne-Gowey here, postdoctoral researcher with the Household Water and Security Experiences Network, HWISE, um, for our one of our first trainings here, how to develop, not how to, developing your first survey. This is the first in a series of videos that we'll have recorded as resources available for you all, for the site PIs and your teams, as you are moving through utilizing this HWISE-USA or HWISE survey at your sites. This training is about developing your survey and is built on the presumption that you all have participated in some of our site PI meetings, have had discussions with Wendy Jepson and Amber Pearson, Alex Brewis, and others about the survey. So you have some familiarity already with it and the team and the process of how we do things. There's a number of important realities about that we have with data sharing agreements with these kinds of participation with the HWISE network. All of that we cover in some of our site PI meetings, these monthly meetings that we have there. This training is under the presumption that you have participated in some of those, and so you have some familiarity already with the survey. So I'm not going to go into a ton of background on the survey, just a little bit of it here. But that's what this training is about. Let me fire up the slides here. Okay, so got the slides going here. Developing your survey. This is recorded 7th of March, 2025. So there may be some changes if you're watching this at some point later. We may have had some changes throughout, but that's okay. This at least gets you the idea of the process that we go through here. Okay, now this is one, as I mentioned, in a series of training videos that I'm making available, that we make available, HWISE makes available to you all as site PIs, those who are getting ready to deploy the HWISE survey. We're in phase 2 of the project right now of the HWISE High Income Country HIC project. We're rolling this out in the United States options at the moment right now as one of the high income country contexts, but it's also being rolled out in Europe for EuroWISE in different contexts in high income countries there as well. This is just one of many types of resources available to you, including Survey CTO, the platform we use for deploying the survey, and we ask you to use in deploying the HWISE survey. There's a lot of resources there. It's one of the many reasons why we picked Survey CTO. That help you think about how do you administer the site to users. How do you set your team permissions for your team? Who's a data collector, who's a data manager, who's managing the whole site, those sorts of things. Lots of those informational things available, including how-to forms, not how-to forms, how-to guides, quick start guides, little tutorials, lots of videos, lots of resources available at Survey CTO. I won't talk about all those in detail right now, but we will in the second training here, which is about using the Survey CTO platform. I'm only going to highlight some of these now, just to let you know that there's a lot of resources available beyond these short training videos that I'll be doing here, or half an hour type training videos. Okay, so you're familiar with the survey to a certain extent. We, and this is jumping in at the point at which you already have some familiarity. Oh, this training, who would this be for? I should mention. This is also for those that haven't yet developed their survey, their HWISE survey, and haven't yet deployed it. So this training wouldn't necessarily be of much value to somebody who's already well along in having deployed the survey and has already been collecting data for six weeks on this, say, for instance, or has already done the data collection in phase 2 and wants to do it in phase 3. It wouldn't necessarily be of value because you're already very familiar with these things. So this is really for those that are getting spun up, getting ready to develop the survey and deploy it, but have not yet done so. Okay, so our survey, the HWISE survey, has 2 loose groupings of modules, of question sets that we ask. There's a core set of modules that everybody asks, and these modules, which are groups of questions, are organized by thematic, by topic, by idea, I guess, such as water supply and consumption, what's showing in this box here on the left. water trust, the PSS-4 scale, which is the social psychological 4 scale. It's been tested. There's also a PSS-10. The emotions module, demographics. These are the kinds of modules that everybody will ask in this box, that everybody that agrees to do to roll out this HWISE high income country context survey agrees to do these modules. So these are fixed. This is what everybody does. But we have a second set of modules that you as a site PI can decide, do I want to include these or not? And I'll talk a little bit more about those later on these slides. But these optional modules include things, and there's two categories of them. They include things like water quality and risk, water capability, water emotions, USDA food insecurity questions. There's a set of those that have already been developed and used elsewhere and are validated as a food insecurity scale elsewhere. Those kinds of things, these modules are available for you all right now, currently, in the form that you could say, I want to include these also in my survey, along with the required ones on the left-hand side here. I would like to include these ones on the right-hand side, and you make a check marks what those look like, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, where do I find these modules? Or the questions associated with each of these modules. I just went through, there's core required, and then there's some other optional modules. Well, we use a data dictionary. It's the foundation document for the survey. It's got all the questions in it. It has the name of the question, the name of the variable. In this case here, I'm looking at plum 1 is, does your residents have the following, and check all that apply. And then the answers, the potential responses are labeled here 1 through 5, hot and cold running water, only cold running water. And, somebody taking the survey would answer those things. This has all of these questions and responses in it with some of the survey logic laid out in it. It's a shared Google sheet. We make it available for you all in view only mode, but this is what has already gone through the process of expert review. In many cases, these have already been developed and deployed in other surveys across the nation. All of them have been at least piloted at some different sites here, including the optional modules, except for the ones in the tab that say optional modules to pilot. Those have been expert reviewed. And yet haven't been tested, at least as of March, at other sites. So we've developed those. We think they're really solid modules ready to go. You all could select to do those, but they haven't been piloted yet. We routinely, sometimes, update this data dictionary. When we do that, I will make a copy of the data dictionary and save it, but change the title of it to have archived in it, and it would maintain that date. So in this case here, what we're looking at in this circle up at the top, sort of center of on the screen capture, the picture, is it says HWISE 2 Phase 2 Data Dictionary, IRB ready, 25th of February, 2025. That is the most current version of our data dictionary, but if we make changes to it, we will update this with a new date to it. And this old one that's dated 25th of February will have archived at the beginning of the file name. And you would presumably not be linking to it. It would be only linking to the new one, but just want to make you aware that's how we work through when there's changes in the data dictionary. And then we alert people to those changes, that we've made some small changes here. We've changed modules around. We've dropped one. We've split some, those kinds of things. Okay. Now, where do I select which modules I want to include in my survey? That is another shared Google sheet that we have. That is what we call the module tracking by site sheet. And this is where you make your selections on what modules you want to include. Now, what I'm showing here is a screen capture from phase 1 data dictionary, and you can see that it indicates phase 1 in the sort of first light blue column, and then below it says phase 2. We've restructured this slightly, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But this is where you go through the data dictionary and decide which modules are of interest to you to include in your survey. Perhaps you've got some particular questions of interest you've been doing, looking at food, water, energy nexus stuff. And our survey already includes water insecurity questions. You would say you want to include the optional food insecurity ones. You would select on this sheet, and from the drop down here, these little drop down menu items, say, yes, this is one I want to include in my survey. So there's a link to it here in the slides. There's also a link in our running notes for these trainings. But this is where you would indicate to us at the HWISE level, this is when you help me make my survey, the base survey that I give to you for you to edit and modify as you need, keeping these questions and answers that are the HWISE ones set. Those are fixed, but those don't change unless we make the change at the network level, and we'll notify everybody of that. But if you wanted to add, say, your own set of questions, I mentioned the food, water, energy nexus type of research. If that's what you're doing at your site, we already have water, and you could add in the food questions. But then you have energy questions you want to add to the survey. That would be something you could do. You could add it to the survey that I give you, that we give you, the base survey, and then you add your own questions into it that have to do with the energy questions you're interested in, as an example. Okay, so that's the process flow. You look at the data dictionary where all of the potential questions that we have are available. They're organized by required and optional modules. Then you determine whatever questions of interest are to you at your research site, you determine which optional modules, if any, you want to include. And then you make that selection on this module tracking site. So as an example, when you look at this new HWISE Phase 2 module tracking sheet, you notice there are no options selected. There's this sort of all green highlighted boxes. That's because these required modules, these core modules, everybody does. Everybody asks those things. So we don't ask, do you want to ask them or not? Because the understanding is that you will ask these questions. That's part of the agreement that we have with you in this. That's these core module questions listed in this red box on the right. But then you can select these optional modules. Now remember, we have optional modules in the data dictionary. Those tabs under there. There's a core module tab, and then an optional module that's ready to go, and an optional module that is ready to go but needs pilot. It hasn't yet been piloted at any site. Those are organized here. What I'm showing you now are these optional modules that have already been expert reviewed and have already been piloted at different sites. They're ready to go. So what you would say here is you'd add in, look at the last row in this picture right here. It says fill in location and fill in who's who the site PI is of the site. So this is, let's say rural Colorado. And Osborne-Gowey is leading the site PI for that particular site. I'm going to collect at 120 households as my target. Then I would select under these optional modules. Right now, you'll notice all of them are selected as no. The default is none of these optional modules will be included in your HWISE survey unless you tell us otherwise. So what you would then select a drop-down menu option here, and do you want this module included? For instance, the second one here, bottled water. Let's say bottled water, I better look at what bottled water means. What are the questions in bottled water? I would go back to the data dictionary, look in that optional modules sheet in there, the tab in that sheet that's labeled optional modules, and find bottled water. I would scroll through it and find bottled water, and then look at the questions that are associated with that module called bottled water. I make a determination, do I want to include those in my survey, yes or no? And if I say yes, I want to, then I would add bottled water, and I would change my drop-down menu here on this module tracking sheet to yes, I'd like to include those. That's as an example. Let me also mention that I've highlighted up here or circled in this red circle that there are, under these modules, these optional modules, they're organized loosely by water-related modules in this first columns O through R, and then S, T, and U are organized by health and well-being modules. These are still optional modules, but if you were wanting to think about how you organize the modules you want included by the research questions at your site, you could think, oh, I'm definitely interested in health and well-being. Should I think about these particular modules here, health and well-being? There's 3 of them right now: water emotions, satisfaction with life, and the USDA food insecurity. Okay, now you'll also notice we have recommended in here. We've shaded these boxes, filled them as a sort of a teal blue, aquamarine blue color. And we have recommended written in there. What does recommended mean? Well, we're recommending these things for if you are including more than the core required modules, to consider adding these ones in. And there's a number of reasons for this. We definitely encourage you to attend our monthly site PI meetings as part of that discussion, because we have a lot of discussions about these things. But let me give you a couple of examples of why we would recommend something like this. One might be we already know a number of researchers, site PIs, across the USA context at different sites, or maybe across globally high-income countries, are already interested in and have a lot of questions associated with, say, bottled water use, purchase of bottled water, and what that looks like as people are adapting, say, to heat or to other things having to do with water insecurity, related to water insecurity. Well, if we already know there's a whole bunch of people interested in it, it would be a good one. We would recommend it because other people are already doing it. It's already been deployed elsewhere, as an example. It could be, or it's getting ready to be deployed across multiple sites, and therefore it makes for really good comparisons for what if you were to collect bottled water at your site to compare with what it looks like in other sites, either in the USA or across other high-income country contexts. So that would be one example reason why you might want to, why we recommend it, and you might want to think about including it if you're including any optional modules. Another example might be if, for example, we know from some of our power analyses that we need to have a larger sample size in order to be able to answer some of the questions associated with what these modules are getting at, so bottled water use. Another example might be that we know we need to have more sites covered in order for us to be able to answer some of these questions, to make it meaningful from a statistical standpoint, so we can see if we're going to detect a signal or not. That might be another reason why we would recommend these modules. Now, all of them are good modules. We're just saying if you have space and you have limited space, you have space to add optional modules, but you have limited space for that, consider some of these recommended modules as a first pass. Okay, the last set of modules are modules, they're optional modules also, but they're what we call they're in development, but they're ready to pilot. They just haven't been piloted elsewhere. But when we say in development, some of them actually are in development. We're working through the expert review process with it right now. And in those cases, what you'll see is that who's the lead for that particular module. In this case, like extreme heat, we've got Brewis is leading, and I think there's a couple, three of us that, but we put together a module about extreme heat, but it hasn't been piloted anywhere yet. Another expectation we have, and this isn't part of the training here, but this would be part of what you would be familiar with having come to when you start coming to some of these site monthly PI meetings, is that, oh, I've lost track. Huh, give me a minute here. Thinking about these optional modules to pilot. Oh, right. If so for instance here with indicating Brewis is the lead, if Alex has particular questions about this that are really intriguing for them, research questions at their site, they've got some theoretical grounding behind extreme heat. Of course, Alex is in Arizona and doing stuff in southern Arizona where it is extreme heat. So there's a lot of reasons why adding an extreme heat module makes sense for them to add. But we expect for these ones that haven't been piloted yet, that whoever is helping lead the efforts for this would be the first ones to deploy these at their site, or at least work with somebody else if they're not deploying the survey at their site for some months yet. Work with others who may be interested in it to help make sure that these module and questions are actually getting at what needs to be get at. So once you start deploying the survey, maybe some question doesn't land, or there needs to be some additional survey enumerator training. The expectation is you would be working with whoever is deploying that, if you aren't the one first of all deploying it at your site. Okay, these optional modules to pilot, though, let me reiterate, these have all been expert reviewed. When we make these available, if they're in the data dictionary, they've already been expert reviewed. They already have theoretical foundations for it. They already have some solid research questions. We've already gone through the process of identifying as network-wide and among panel of experts that the questions we are asking are the minimum number sets of questions that are necessary for us to be able to answer some of these questions associated with around extreme heat and say water insecurity, which is the HWISE survey. Okay, so those are the sort of ways to think about our modules. We've got the core modules, then we have optional modules, but under optional modules, there's a fork in those. Some are already used across multiple sites. They've already been tested and piloted. Those are the ones that are called, in this middle panel here, these are optional modules, and we've got them split by water and by health and well-being at the moment. And then we have a second type of optional module. That's ones that have been expert reviewed or in the process of expert review and have yet to be piloted in any particular site as of March anyway, but are either being piloted right now, we just haven't done the analyses with them, or anticipating those are coming right up immediately. Okay. So now, thinking back to the data dictionary, these questions, when you're looking at and you're selecting in your sheet, you're telling us which modules you want to include. As a reminder, as you're making this determination, it's about the realities at your site, the type of research that you're interested in, engaged in, outside of the water and security side of things that might dovetail well with this. Where do you find those? You go back to the data dictionary to find those. And you definitely want to make sure you're in the most recent one. If it says archived up in the name, it is no longer current. This one is current. It's current as of February 25th. There haven't been any changes to it since then. Let me see here. This, when you're in the data dictionary, again, these tabs down here, the core modules, everybody asks these. The optional modules, that corresponds with this middle box here of these optional ones that have already been piloted, expert reviewed and piloted. That's the optional modules tab. And then the optional modules to pilot corresponds with this third box. They've already been expert reviewed, but they haven't been tested yet at the different sites. Okay. So where do you indicate to us to help you create your first round survey of the HWISE part of things? Anything that's existing that we have in HWISE already, we have together, and we'll help you start with that, and then you make changes to it. Where do you do that? Where do you indicate to us so we can help you build that survey? That's in the form definition tracking, the module, that's in the module tracking sheet by site. This is where I look to help create your base survey. We have a master survey, if you will, that has everything in it. All of these modules, both optional, the required and the different types of optionals, already in it. But of course, you're not asking all those questions, or probably not asking those questions. So what we do is we create for you a subset of that one, a branch, if you will, a fork of it, that only includes the stuff you're looking to do at your particular site. Well, how do I know what that is? Well, it's because you've indicated so on the tracking sheet for help me building your survey. Now, these modules that you put together constitute your survey. We have the core survey, the core HWISE survey. That's those all required modules. But your survey in particular, let's say it was the rural Colorado context. Let's say I'm a site PI for rural Colorado HWISE survey. And I've selected a number of optional modules that I want included. I've noted those on that module tracking sheet, and now it's time to create this forked survey off of the master one that only includes those modules. Now that becomes your survey. Your survey is this subset of additional optional modules appended to the core modules. But you may also have other questions you're asking, you're interested in, that have nothing to do with the HWISE network, and you absolutely are welcome to add those. We encourage you to add those kind of things into it. And there's lots of resources available. I can point you to some of those resources for how you do that. Probably have part of a training will be in using Survey CTO. We'll be updating the form definition sheet, and I can walk through a little bit of that. But there's a lot on how to do that within Survey CTO, resources there. So now how do we turn the data dictionary and the module tracking sheet, where you've indicated which optional modules you want, how do we turn that into something that we can collect the data? Because right now those are just Google Sheets, and that doesn't help us actually do the survey. Well, we use what's called Survey CTO. It's a platform for collecting data. It's made by researchers, university researchers who had used a number of other platforms, liked parts of different things of it, also saw some gaps, and set out to build their own. And it's now a very robust system. It has an exceptional amount of resources. It's got a large user community. It meets all of the requirements for security and safety of data and data collection globally. It is sort of the main place for safety of these things. It's got so many other features available with it too. If you're familiar with using Qualtrics or Kobo Collect or ODK or any of those other ones, it's a familiar feel to that. Most of these survey things are, but we use Survey CTO as the platform for deploying your survey being the core and the optional ones. There's lots of resources available. We've got some links to that in here. Plus I have a resources document that points to a number of these other Survey CTO resources, plus resources that we've put together to help you develop your survey. And those will be available to you. You attend the monthly site PI meetings. For this, you'll have access to some of these materials as well. Survey CTO doesn't just plug right into Google Sheets. What we need to do is essentially create a document that Survey CTO reads. And what is it doing? Well, the data dictionary is where we start with this. That's where all these questions are organized by module, required, optional. But we need to turn it into something that Survey CTO can read. And what is that? Well, that is Oops, that comes from the data dictionary. That is what is called a form definition sheet. Now, this is an actual Microsoft spreadsheet that Survey CTO uses. This is what is the translation document between our data dictionary and Survey CTO is this form definition. Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And I'll talk about this here briefly in a moment. What I want to highlight for you here on the slide is that what we have in the form definition, there's some linkages, explicit linkages, or I'm going to make them explicit, between the form definition sheet, which is your survey in Survey CTO, and the names of these kinds of things. So again, recall that we're looking at 3 different sheets down here. This is the data dictionary, 3 different tabs on the bottom, core, modules, and these 2 types of optional. But at the top of this sheet, organized by each of these modules, which are indicated here by in column B, the different shaded colored items, water insecurity scale items and water supply and consumption modules, these 2 different modules here. We also have across the top these what are called the variable, and that's what we've named this particular question. Each question is a variable in the survey. The question itself is in column D, and it's labeled question. And then the response options. How do people respond? If it's a canned response already, or if it's an open manual entry response. The response is what we call it in the data dictionary sheet here. Other forms call it different things. Survey CTO calls it a choice. I'll talk about that here in a minute. So data dictionary to this form definition. So this form definition is an Excel spreadsheet. This is what translates our data dictionary and the modules and questions that we have in it and responses, plus logic, question logic, into something that Survey CTO reads. It's just a spreadsheet that has lots of columns in it, and you'll become more familiar with it through time, but I'm giving you just a screenshot here of what the beginning of this, what's called a form definition. That's what Survey CTO uses. This is what Survey CTO translates into something that we see on the screen. So in this case, what we're looking at here, I'm going to orient you to a couple of things. Let's see, where's the next slide? Okay, at the very bottom, there's a number of tabs in your form definition, number of sheets in here. One's called survey. This is where all of the formatting, if you will, for how the survey appears in Survey CTO comes from, but it also lists the question itself. The choices tab is our responses, the response options. These other tabs in here you won't mess with probably much at all. The help tabs might help orient you to some resources in there. But it's mostly you're going to be working in the survey sheet and the choices sheet. Okay, now what's the linkage between in these sheets and our data dictionary? Well, I mentioned modules. We have what we call modules which is sort of a number of questions that are thematically related. Those are all bundled together. In the form definition Survey CTO, that's called a group. So you'll notice here there's a line called begin group. So we have a group called start info. That's the name of it. You'll notice that in column B, it's called variable, but in this case, start info. And it's just the starting information. So we have a number of things about who is the numerator team. This is before they even get started asking questions of the respondent. We note in here that variable is what's called name in the form definition. So variable and name. Variable in our data dictionary, form in the form definition is called name. In our data dictionary, it's called question, but in the form definition, Survey CTO reads, it's called field underscore label, the heading here for column D. Modules in groups are synonymous together. What we call a module in our data dictionary is, or group in the data dictionary is called group, rather. It's called group in the form definition sheet here. Okay, now I mentioned that there's different options that people can respond with. Sometimes we can't, those are canned responses, options 1 through 5, for instance. If it's a Likert scale and we've got them strongly disagree up to strongly agree, for example. Those are called our responses in the data dictionary, but here in the form definition, they're called choice. And I've mentioned that here by a couple of arrows here. Now, a thing of note, and I'll do more of this training once we get into Survey CTO more, but what we're looking at here, so row 14 in this picture, it says select _1 enumerator. So what we're saying is, and this is where all this background coding happens in the form definition sheet, select 1 means, to Survey CTO, among all the options available, the respondent can only select one. They couldn't select multiple options. But okay, they're selecting one. What are they selecting one from? In this case, they're selecting one in the question would be enumerator. The variable name would be name, or variable would be enumerator, but we're calling this the label, so the question would be interviewer name. What is the name of the interviewer conducting this survey? Well, we're calling that enumerator. And in enumerator, it's saying select one from this list called enumerator. Enumerator shows up in choices. So in this case, we would have, oh, I've already showed that one. In this case, we would have, under the choices tab, we would have a list of enumerators, and looks like I've shown you the wrong one at the moment here. But enumerators might have 5 on your enumerator team, and I've got some fake names in there that you would want to replace. But in this case, all of those options, all of the response options that a person could select are going to appear in choices, and we have to call them something. In this case, the list it's called list name. Here is DRK source, and you'll see that in a moment. But the value, well, for DRK source, for the question for DRK source, drink source, what's your primary drinking source at home, of water at home? We have a number of options. We've got 1 through 8 different options. The first through 1 through 7 are described over here in the label side, but then we have an other option, which we've always called other, as always showing up as 98. So we have 8 total options that somebody could select in a response to this particular question about what's the primary drinking source. Same thing for enumerator. If I were to go back, we would have one for enumerator. Here we go. Okay, so again, list name under the choices tab is enumerator. Let me go back up 2 here and show you again. Selecting one from this list called enumerator, you select one option. That option is some sort of dummy options in here. None of these are dummies, but you know what I mean from a variable standpoint. You would change your enumerator team. You could add, let's say 10 enumerators, you'd add 5 more or 4 more enumerators to your enumerator list and label them 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then put their names in it. But you'd change these dummy names in here to reflect your actual team. Okay, let me see here. There's a couple of these you'll have to update under this choices tab. Go back up to the choice tab under here. Most of these questions all show up on the survey. Not most. All of the questions that we already have in the HWISE survey, both core and optional, show up in the survey tab. All of the option sets, all of the choice sets, all of the response options people can answer for all of our HWISE questions for the survey, both core, required, and optional, will show up under the choices tab. And some of those you'll have to update. So enumerator, you're going to have to update to make that be your own team. I've put all these options that you will update at the very end of all the lists. So you'll notice this is down on row 180, for example, for location. And we have 5 locations, 1 through 4 plus 98 other. These I've tried to put all at the very end of your the last part of the list name. So these are the last rows that show up because those are the ones you'll need to be oriented to changing. But you might add other questions to your survey, as I mentioned before, that have nothing to do with HWISE. You would add those on the survey tab, and then you would add the response options, the choices people can select from in this choice tab as well, and you can add those. I would recommend adding them above your enumerator one, enumerator and location, because those are the ones you change. But this is what you'll be updating. And this is how Survey CTO reads back and forth, 2 different tabs, to then display it. What does it look like when you display it? That is, let's go to this particular question. This is called, as I've circled it, this question number 3 is actually called DRK source, and that should be familiar from what we just came through, drink source. And the question is, in the last 4 weeks, what was your primary drinking water source at home? Please select one. And then the question options that they can answer with are below. Those come from that choices tab. And if you're looking back at the data dictionary, that would be under what we call response. There's a column called response, potential responses. And this is what your survey then looks like, translated from data dictionary to selecting the modules, to telling me about those modules, to creating your survey, to uploading it into Survey CTO and then deploying it. It now looks like this. The first question, or this question, drink source. What's your primary drinking source at home in the last 4 weeks? Please select one. Okay, I won't go into more detail with this part here. We'll save that for different training, but this is walking you through developing your survey to show you what it looks like at the end. I should mention we also have Spanish translations for many of these modules and questions and responses, but not all of them. If you're deploying this in a Spanish language context, you could in Survey CTO for any of the ones that we've already have Spanish language translations for, you could select an option to do this all in Spanish. And then the same question, drink source, still drink source over here, but has been translated. Somebody did the work to translate this. In this case, this is Alicia Cooperman and her team for their deploying this in El Paso, Texas region. But they not all of they did all the translations for anything that they were including in the survey. For the optional modules. Some of these optional modules don't yet have Spanish language translations. You could do the translations, and then we'd ask you to share them with us so we can share them with the entire network. It's one of the benefits of being part of a network is we share our resources with each other. Okay, there's lots of support in Survey CTO. This is, as a reminder, Survey CTO has tons of resources available. They will get back to us very quickly when we initiate a ticket request. But before we even initiate a ticket request, what we can do is we can go into their Survey CTO search and search for all kinds of resources that they have available, the how-to guides, the quick start guides. But if we are submitting a request, we do this through Survey CTO. They're very quick about responding. I would just ask that if you have something you're running into that you can't find the resources for on Survey CTO, I can't point them to you because we don't know what those are. Before you submit a request, just if you could coordinate it with me, because we might have 6 other sites that might have a similar kind of a question. And I want to make sure that when we ask the question, we're asking it one time for our HWISE network, and then the answer is available to everybody one time rather than having that be sort of siloed at one site, because we want to basically be able to help everybody here. Their resource center has tons of these resources. So for instance, if you were interested in updating role, you would just search in their HWISE site for updating role. And then there's lots of things, user community, forums, resources, how to create user roles, a case guide to case management, lots of resources available there. And as a reminder, we'll have our own resources available too. We've got these training webinars, videos that we're recording. We have a resource document we've compiled that points you to a lot of different things, plus also has a lot of step-by-step guidance in there for you. And there's just so many resources available at Survey CTO, and we'll help you with a bunch of those as well. Okay, that takes us through developing your survey. I think that is the end of it. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me, jeremiah.osgo@tamu.edu. Oops, I forgot to mention here, I do have office hours. And we're starting to do office hours quite regularly, every other week or every week in some instances. So I'm encouraging you to sign up for office hours. I'll make those available too. Those are currently now in our notes, training notes document. We distributed those to the last site, HWISE-USA site PI monthly meeting. That's there as well, but I'll add that in. So if you have got questions, it's best to bring those to office hours because others might very well have the same kinds of questions, and I can have some focus time with you there. So I ask you to sign up for office hours, 15-minute increments. But send me an email about that, and I can send you the link to the office hours. Okay, I think that covers this training here. It sure does. Anyway, thank you for your attention on this video. Hopefully it's been helpful. If you do have follow-up things, please do reach out to me and plan to come to some office hours. All right. Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you on the calls, and hope you have a good rest of your day.